What happens when a man's greatest talent comes from the very forces that are also destroying him? In the middle of the 20th century, when the art world was desperate for something new, one man emerged who didn't just paint. He changed the very definition of art itself. His canvases looked nothing like the masterpieces of the past. No portraits, no landscapes, no gentle strokes of the brush. Instead, violent splatters, chaotic drips, and wild swirls of paint. To critics, it looked like madness. To admirers, it was pure genius. His name was Jackson Pollock, the cowboy from Wyoming who would rise to become one of the most famous artists in history. A man whose paintings sold for millions, whose face graced the cover of Life magazine, and whose technique, drip painting, turned him into a cultural icon. But behind the glory, there was darkness. Pollock lived a life consumed by addiction, haunted by inner demons, and trapped in the paradox of his own success. The same wild energy that fueled his genius also tore his life apart. And in 1956, at the age of just 44, his story ended as violently as his art had been created, smashed in a car crash, leaving behind a legacy that would forever divide the world. Was he a fraud, or was he a genius? This is the story of Jackson Pollock, a story of chaos, fame, betrayal, and brilliance. A story of a man who rewrote the rules of art and paid the ultimate price. Jackson Pollock was born in 1912 in Coty, Wyoming. The landscape of his childhood was harsh and rugged, dusty plains, endless skies, and the kind of loneliness that would shape his restless spirit. His father, a farmer and later a surveyor, moved the family constantly. By the time Jackson was a teenager, he had already lived in Arizona, California, and beyond. This rootless life created in him a sense of displacement, of never belonging. He was the youngest of 5 brothers, often lost in the shadows, withdrawn, moody, and quick to anger. But one thing captured him: drawing. His early sketches showed promise, and more importantly, they gave him an outlet. Jackson Pollock wasn't a boy who could put feelings into words. He wasn't articulate, he wasn't social, but when his pencil touched paper, when his hands smeared ink or charcoal, something raw and emotional emerged. In 1928, Pollock left California to study art in Los Angeles. He was awkward, volatile, but his instructors saw something in him, a wild, untrained energy that defied discipline. They encouraged him to go further, and in 1930, Jackson followed his older brother Charles to New York City. It was here, among the chaos of the Great Depression, that Jackson Pollock would begin his long, painful journey toward becoming an artist. New York in the 1930s was alive with cultural ferment. European artists fleeing fascism brought bold new ideas to America. Cubism, Surrealism, the radical visions of Picasso, Miro, and the Mexican muralists Diego Rivera and José Clemente Orozco. Pollock soaked it all in. He enrolled in the Art Students League under the guidance of Thomas Hart Benton, a regionalist painter known for sweeping depictions of American life. Benton's influence was strong. Pollock admired his energy, his sense of movement, but Jackson was never satisfied with simply copying styles. He wanted to find his own voice, and yet that voice was drowned in chaos. From the very beginning, Pollock battled alcoholism. His drinking was uncontrollable, his moods violent. He would vanish for days, erupt into fits of rage, or collapse into silence. Friends worried about his instability, but they also saw flashes of brilliance in his early paintings. Dark, swirling compositions filled with mythological figures and tortured forms. During this time, Pollock became fascinated by the psychology of Carl Jung. He explored themes of the subconscious, dreams, and primal symbols. His canvases began to resemble visions from another world, full of strange archetypes and fractured shapes. Still, recognition didn't come. He was broke, drifting, taking odd jobs, even working for the government's federal art project. The New York art world remained indifferent. But Pollock was changing. Inside him, a storm was building. The 1940s changed everything. Pollock's early work, though chaotic, began attracting the attention of Peggy Guggenheim, a wealthy art patron determined to bring modernism to America. She saw something in Pollock that others missed, an intensity, a raw power that couldn't be ignored. In 1943, Guggenheim offered him his first solo exhibition. It was a turning point. She even commissioned him to create a massive mural for her townhouse. At first, Pollock froze, paralyzed by the scale of the task. But when he finally began, he unleashed something extraordinary. The mural, stretching over 20 feet, was a frenzy of color and form, an explosion of movement that seemed alive. It was unlike anything America had ever seen. From that moment, Pollock was no longer a struggling unknown. He was a rising star, but his true revolution was still to come. Around 1947, Pollock stumbled upon a technique that would define his career and his legacy. Instead of painting on an easel, he laid his canvas on the floor. Instead of careful brushstrokes, he dripped, splattered, and poured paint directly onto the surface. He used sticks, knives, even his bare hands. This was not painting, it was performance. Pollock didn't just apply paint, he moved with it, circling the canvas, flinging pigment with rhythmic intensity. His studio became a battlefield. The result was staggering. Webs of color, endless layers, chaotic yet strangely ordered. His drip paintings seemed to capture motion itself, the raw energy of creation frozen in time. In 1949, Life magazine put Pollock on the cover, asking, "Is he the greatest living painter in the United States?" Overnight, Pollock became a cultural sensation. Some called him a genius, others dismissed him as a fraud, but no one could ignore him. Pollock's fame only intensified his struggles. Alcohol consumed him. His marriage to fellow artist Lee Krasner was turbulent. She supported him fiercely, yet endured his infidelities, his violent rages, his self-destruction. Inside, Pollock was collapsing under the weight of expectation. The more famous he became, the harder it was to paint. Critics demanded more. Collectors wanted masterpieces on command. But Pollock couldn't simply reproduce his magic. His art came from instinct, from chaos. The pressure suffocated him. By the early 1950s, his drinking spiraled out of control. Friends distanced themselves. His work grew darker, heavier, less celebrated. The golden years of his drip paintings seemed to fade. Yet even in decline, Pollock remained magnetic. To see him paint was to witness a man locked in combat with his own demons, each canvas a battlefield of survival. By 1956, Pollock was at his breaking point. He drank endlessly, alienated those around him, and stopped painting altogether. His marriage to Lee Krasner fractured. She left for Europe that summer, hoping distance might help. But for Jackson, there was no escape. On the night of August 11th, 1956, Pollock got behind the wheel of his Oldsmobile convertible after heavy drinking. With him were two women, his mistress, Ruth Kligman, and her friend, Edith Metzger. On the winding roads of East Hampton, Pollock drove recklessly, swerving at high speed. At 10:15 p.m., he lost control. The car flipped and crashed into the woods. Edith Metzger was killed instantly. Pollock was thrown from the car, his body broken. His life ended in an instant. He was 44 years old. Ruth survived. Lee Krasner, upon hearing the news, returned from Europe shattered but resolute. She would dedicate the rest of her life to preserving and protecting Pollock's legacy. Jackson Pollock's death froze him in time. The tortured genius, the tragic artist who burned too brightly and too briefly. His drip paintings became symbols of a new age, icons of abstract expressionism. Today, his works sell for staggering sums. One of his canvases, Number 5, 1948, reportedly sold for over $140 million. His influence stretched far beyond painting, shaping the worlds of performance art, modernism, and even popular culture. But Pollock remains controversial. To some, his art is meaningless chaos. To others, it is the purest form of expression, a mirror of the human condition. Perhaps both are true. For in the end, Jackson Pollock embodied the paradox of genius, the fine line between order and chaos, between brilliance and destruction. His life was messy, violent, incomplete, but his art still speaks. It whispers of storms, of fire, of the restless soul of a man who could not find peace, except in the violent dance of paint and canvas. So, was Jackson Pollock a fraud or a genius? Maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe Pollock wasn't trying to answer anything at all. Maybe he was simply showing us what it feels like to be alive. Chaotic, imperfect, desperate, and free. And perhaps that is why, long after his tragic end, Jackson Pollock's paintings still matter. Because in their chaos, we see ourselves. If you enjoyed the video, kindly subscribe, like, and share. Until next time, thank you for watching.